Now, here is CBS News correspondent Bill Plant.
There were very few Arab Americans on the prairies of South Dakota, and yet it was from there that James Abourezk, the son of a Lebanese peddler, rose through the ranks to become a United States Senator. A passionate defender of Arab causes, his outspoken ways have made him a magnet for controversy. Retired from the Senate after one term, he has now written a book about his unusual experiences in the world of politics. The book is Advise and Dissent. It's not a typical autobiography. Joining us now, James Abourezk, who was definitely not your typical senator. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
What made you go back and relive the earlier parts of your life as a senator in this book, now that you have gone on to another career, really?
Well, friends had urged me to write something about my experiences in the Senate, so, over the last 5 or 6 years, I started jotting down memories. And then I decided earlier this year I was writing a book on American Indians, and I thought I'd set that aside and just formalize these memoirs, which is what's happened.
Well, you had a reputation in the Senate as being a maverick in many different ways. And you apparently enjoyed it, did you?
Well, I don't know that I enjoyed the title maverick. Actually, what I found was necessary in order to get anybody's attention on some of these issues that were on the cutting edge was that you had to do unusual things, such as filibuster. I guess that Howard Metzenbaum and I conducted the first filibuster on the side of the people in the history of the Senate. I don't know if there had been another one, but we tried to stop the deregulation of natural gas, which, in fact, after it was deregulated, raised the price of natural gas tremendously. We tried to stop that in an effort to protect the consumer. That was an outrageous act, according to a lot of people, but I thought that the majority trying to raise the price of natural gas was an outrageous act.
Well, that tells something about where you were coming from politically, but before we go back to that, let me just ask you, you say in the book that when you got into the Senate, it was a very different place from the place that you had imagined that the U.S. Senate would be.
Well, yeah, actually, of course, when one sees all these senators on television, as I had over the years, Symington, McGovern, Humphrey, Kennedy, on and on and on, Harold Hughes and so on, you get a different picture. They were all running for president back in those days, if you recall.
A lot of them still are.
And still are, yeah. And you get a different picture. And sitting in the same room with them and watching, their foibles, their petty squabbles and so on, you really get a different picture. I mean, I sat in the first Democratic caucus in 1973 when I went in, and they were debating the carpet bombing of Vietnam. And that was a very moving experience. I write about it in the memoir. Stu Symington talked about how he couldn't face his grandchildren anymore because the United States had become the bully of the world by bombing the Vietnamese the way they did. Here was a guy who used to be a war hawk. And Danny Inouye, Senator Inouye from Hawaii, talking about the racism inherent in the bombing of North Vietnam. He said, in fact, I'll quote him, he said, if people were bombing Germany or, Swedes or Norwegians, he said there'd be such an outrageous cry, a cry of outrage you couldn't believe it. He said, but you view these people as just another bunch of gooks, and that's why you're doing it to them. He was very outraged about it. But it's really interesting to watch those people from the inside.
Well, but the picture you're painting here is of some serious business going on, and yet the picture that you paint in the book also is of a lot of non-serious business.
Well, there's a lot of that, too. I tell stories about Senator Jim Eastland of Mississippi, who unfortunately is now deceased. But Jim, although we disagreed on virtually every issue there was a fascinating character. And it's characters like him that made the Senate interesting. I'm not sure that we have too many of those kind of people left. What I see in the U.S. Senate today are a bunch of sand-for-eyes, pre-shrunk senators who read polls every day to see which way they ought to jump. Back then, people, at least when I was in office, people were visceral about their beliefs. There's still a few of those senators left. Fritz Hollings, for example, Mark Hatfield. They're very visceral, and they use their judgment to represent their constituents. But there are too many people up there who just read polls and say, this is what I'll do today as opposed to tomorrow.
All right, that brings us back to your politics. You were one of a small then, smaller now, band of liberals. There's no other way to put it, except in your case, perhaps prairie populist liberals. Was it an uncomfortably isolated position?
Not really, no. I guess I'm uncomfortable in the majority more than anything, much more than I am in the minority. I feel that the way the establishment treats people nowadays is not the right way to do it, and I'd like to protest.
Well, who runs the Senate? Speaking of the establishment, who really runs the place?
I
Is there a
suppose,
so-called establishment?
oh, I think there's an establishment in this country that sort of directs the Senate in a way by the use of campaign contributions and other attributes of great, fabulous wealth.
Well, that makes you the outsider, and that's a position that you enjoyed, I think, judging from this book.
I don't know if I enjoyed it or not. I felt it was a responsibility. I'd like to put it that way.
You chose not to run after one term in the Senate, having been in the House for a couple of years. What soured you, or was it that?
Well, I wouldn't call it souring. It's just a life I didn't want to lead any longer. I learned a lot. I enjoyed some of the time that I was in there, especially the work on the Senate floor, the filibustering, the use of the Senate rules, which I learned quite rapidly after fighting against a Southerner, Jim Allen, for 3 or 4 filibusters. I enjoyed that. But I got tired of sitting on the Senate floor waiting for some long-winded senator to finish his speech so I could go home and eat dinner with my family. I got tired of traveling every weekend to go to South Dakota or to go to raise money, for whatever purposes we raise money for.
But to most people, this would be the culmination of a lifetime ambition.
Well, that's what I thought when I first ran. When I was outside of it, there couldn't be a better job than the U.S. Senate. As Bill Hathaway said, there's no heavy lifting.
Pays pretty good.
Yeah, the pay is good. You get to call all these great senators by their first names. But, beyond that, it really is not a life for someone who wants a family. And unfortunately, I found out when I started spending more time with my family that my wife didn't much like me. That was one of the tragic parts of this thing. We got divorced right after I left the Senate. And it does damage, great damage to family life. That's what I didn't want to do.
A lot of the time in your book is taken up with your explanation of the American Indian cause, something that you apparently came to understand much more while you were in the Senate. Is that right?
Well, yeah, before I was in the Senate also. I was born and raised on the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation in South Dakota.
But you talked about how your views evolved and
Oh,
changed.
they did. Yeah, there was a lot of racism against Indians out on that reservation and other reservations. And I joined, when I was young, I learned from the adults in that community how to be racist against Indians. But I later evolved into someone who tried to redeem that. And I spent an awful lot of time and energy trying to, redeem myself with the Indian people and to eliminate the racism and try to give them their rights that they'd been denied for such a long, long time.
The Indian struggle for civil rights in this country is not exactly on the front burner anymore since the 70s, I would guess. Why?
Well, it was put on the front burner by the American Indian movement, the militant Indians. They adopted a policy of confrontation with authorities as a way to get attention for their grievances. And, of course, a lot of them were put in jail and sort of run around since that time, so they've calmed that down. They've adopted the American Indian movement has adopted a different policy now, and it's not confrontation, therefore it doesn't make news. And the government is right back in the saddle where it was before, that is, suppressing the Indians and suppressing the Indian problem.
And nothing much has changed in your view?
Not an awful lot. No, the Indians, I sort of think, learned how to organize, but it hasn't done them a lot of good. There's such a psychology of hopelessness and despair out in the reservations that it's going to take an awful lot of work by the public and the government to overcome that. And the government, as I see it now, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has no interest in overcoming it. I had a BIA superintendent testify to my committee one time. I was chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee. He said, well, what we do in the BIA is survival management, survival of our jobs, and that's what we're interested in, really. I later hired the guy to be one of my staff people. He was so honest about it. But that's the tragedy of Indian affairs today.
You also gained a reputation during your one term in the Senate as a passionate defender of Arab causes. You went and met with PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat and were roundly denounced for it.
Well, that happens, with the Israeli lobby being as one-sided as they are, of course. Anyone who wants to talk peace in the Middle East gets roundly denounced by the Israeli lobby simply because Israel itself, which the lobby represents, doesn't want to give up any territory for peace. They want peace, but they don't want to give up any territories for it. The territories they took illegally, by the way, in a couple of different wars.
Are you anti-Semitic? The charge has been made.
No, no. That means I would be racist, wouldn't it be? That means that I would judge Jews as Jews rather than as individuals. No, I'm not that at all. And of course, I reject that charge. That's an old trick used by members of the Israeli lobby to try to silence people. And it's never worked on me, really.
But you have spoken out often during your public career about the, quote, Israeli lobby, unquote, and its influence in the U.S. Senate and in Washington generally.
Yes, well, I mean, somebody's got to speak out. Basically, the Israeli lobby has the most influence on U.S. policy in the Middle East more than anybody. In fact, I've had people in the State Department tell me that they cannot undertake any new initiatives whatsoever because the Israeli lobby blocks them. Just simply, the job of the lobby is, first of all, to keep U.S. taxpayers' money flowing from the Treasury into Israel, and that's several billions of dollars a year. I like to put it this way, that by the time you have your breakfast coffee in the morning, the U.S. has given $12 million each day to Israel of taxpayers' money.
But of course,
they don't have to pay it back.
There are historical reasons for the long, close ties of the United States with the State of Israel.
And what are those?
Well, there is the usual way that it's put is that it is a bulwark of democracy in the Middle East.
Well,
that is what the State Department says. And
of course, well, they don't really say that. That's what the Israeli lobby says. But what the argument is, the justification is they're going to be a bulwark against Soviet expansion in the Middle East. First of all, it's a joke that they could stand up against the Soviet Union, and secondly, the Soviets obviously are not going to expand in the Arab world anyhow. They have no interest in that, as they've shown. And now that Ronald Reagan has hugged Gorbachev, and it's no longer an evil empire, the Cold War is over, and so that justification is out the window.
Well, that may be, but without arguing that, we go back to the fact that there is an enormous constituency in this country.
Well,
and that is something that you have criticized in the past.
That's the Israeli lobby. That's what you're talking about.
But what's wrong with that? Ethnic groups of all shades have constituencies in this country. Arab Americans don't happen to be one of the larger ones.
Well, they happen to be one of the smaller ones. But, you know, there's a great difference. I mean, the Israeli lobby is not the PTA, and it's not the milk producers, it's not the Cattlemen's Association. It's a lobby for a foreign government. And when you start lobbying for a foreign government and skewing the politics of Congress against the interest of America, there's something wrong with that. Now, that's a great difference. When you say what's wrong with it, that's what's wrong with it. The Israeli lobby provides so much campaign money for candidates early on, very cleverly, it's cleverly designed, that these people sometimes vote against the American interest in order to save their own election, to get money for their own elections. And that's widespread in the Congress. I mean, let me ask you a question. When you see the statements in Congress on the brutality in China, I mean, my heavens, they couldn't get up fast enough and denounce China for their brutality. And in South Africa, the same thing, and it's proper that they should do so. But there hasn't been one voice that you can tell me that is raised against what Israel's doing in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, the terrible brutality, the killing, the torture, the beatings that they're doing over there. Nobody it's silent.
It's totally silent. It's not a hidden issue, though. It's out there.
But do you hear anybody in Congress saying anything?
I certainly see it on the editorial pages. Jim Abourezk, thank you for being with us. Author of a new book, your memoirs, Advise and Dissent. Stay with us.
Still to come on Nightwatch, a gifted writer returns, and pure acoustical clarinet. Now in Washington, filling in for Charlie Rose, here is CBS News correspondent Terrence Smith.
Welcome back. The clarinet is Eddie Daniels' calling. Daniels is determined to make one of the most difficult instruments to play as beautiful and as flexible as a violin or a piano. He's now at the forefront of a small but important renaissance of the clarinet. He keeps its woody acoustical purity while also creating a current sound. Eddie Daniels may be best known for balancing classical music with jazz. It's a sound that creates both creative tension and creative freedom. That combination can be heard in his performance last summer with the Boston Pops. The music is Solfeggietto Metamorphosis by Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. Eddie Daniels' newest release is called Nepenthe. He joins us now, clean-shaven, in our studio.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
Nepenthe, what's it mean?
Well, it was originally an ancient Greek drug mentioned in mythology. It was taken to overcome pain. So my album, Nepenthe, is a non-addictive, maybe slightly addictive musical drug.
I think it's addictive, Eddie, because I listened to it repeatedly last night and again this morning. I just love it.
Well, thank you.
You have that wonderful special quality that a few musicians have, which is your own sound, not just your own style, but your own sound. A sound distinctive enough that people can recognize it, come to know it, can hear it, can switch on a radio and pick it up in the middle of a tune or of a performance and know who it is. The late Paul Desmond had such a sound. You knew it was Desmond the moment you caught a phrase of his music. You've got it too. I don't know how one gets a sound. I mean, is it just years and years with the same instrument?
It's interesting, when I go out and I do workshops in universities, what I really talk about to the students is learning to find your voice. We each have an inner voice of our own. I feel like every human being on this planet has an inner voice that is special and different from everybody else's. And if you play an instrument and you contact your inner soul and you find who you are, and we're all trying to find out who we are as people and go deeper, and you do it with an instrument, you find that voice that connects with your own spirit in a certain way. So we all have that voice. We all have our own voice when we speak. You know, I would know your voice, and you would know mine if we spoke to each other enough, and I called you on the phone, you say, ah, Eddie.
Sure,
you know.
But through an instrument. Many people play the same instrument, whatever that instrument might be. Many played, but you could tell Paul Desmond.
That's
you
right.
knew that sound. That it was once described by one critic as liquid champagne. It had a certain urbanity and subtlety to it. So do you. There's a certain sophistication and softness but willingness to take risks, it seems to me.
Right.
Because sometimes listening to you, I wonder how you're going to get out of a few spots that you've got yourself into.
Well, that's
but you
the
do.
fun. That's the fun. Getting yourself, if I were to do every single time what I exactly know and have it all set and I knew the notes and it was all perfect, it would be boring. And I've always rebelled against that. I always wanted to do something a little bit different, a little twist. That's probably why I pun a lot in conversations with people. You know, you hear something and you just try to make something humorous about it or do something different with it.
Because it really is different, and you have given it a twist. I mean, your approach to the instrument is quite different than what we classically think of. But let me ask you about the instrument a little bit, because after all, I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut as a jazz fan, and not far from where Benny Goodman had a house. Benny Goodman defined the clarinet for many of us. It had come out, we heard it a great deal, of course, in Dixieland, and then in swing through Benny Goodman. Then it did disappear somewhat. I mean, it wasn't it hasn't been the prominent instrument.
That's right.
In the last, say, 20 years, that it was, I think, before that. Why? Why should that happen? Why should there be fads and instruments don't change?
It's interesting. I think, first of all, Benny was such a huge influence on people that most clarinetists took his voice that he was giving as his own. Because he was so persuasive. It was such a great voice that it was such a model that so many people, still today, there are many clarinetists that Benny is who they want to go towards. I always felt that I wanted to go towards something, this instrument has potential to have many, many, many voices, as we all have potential to be many people and many personalities. And I wanted to bring it out. I felt like I owe it to that wooden stick to bring out another voice, another sound. And it also helps the student to show that we're not locked into one way of doing something.
But so many clarinet players will go to the saxophone. They'll go for its, I suppose, greater, what they regard as its greater flexibility, fluidity, a certain sophistication of sound. You did the opposite.
Well, it's interesting. You really know about this, because I was a saxophone player for many years. Most people who have followed my career know me as a saxophone player. I was in Thad Jones Mellow's band as a tenor saxophone player. I made many records as a saxophonist.
And I read somewhere that Thad didn't want you to play the clarinet.
No, no.
Why not?
Well, on a particular record at the Vanguard, which is called Live at the Village Vanguard, it was 5 of us in the sax section, and we each had 32 bars on a very quick tune called The Little Pixie. And here Eddie Daniels, who likes to do little quirky, little different things and not be in the mold all the time. You had Joe Farrell played his solo, then Jerry Dodgen, and then Jerome Richardson. And he came to me, and I had the clarinet there, and the mics were on. I picked up the clarinet, and I played my solo. And I won the Downbeat New Star Award for the year for the 32 bars I did on the clarinet. But I later found out through Mel that Thad said, "What did he do that for?" You know, because he had
Well, he had
mind,
envisioned it a certain way.
That's right. He still heard Benny Goodman or maybe the bar mitzvah sound of the clarinet, some of the ethnic sound of the instrument. He couldn't really picture the newer way that it could be, you know.
You were, well, I'll tell you what, I'm so curious about this instrument and what you do with it and the different sounds that we have to take a break. But when we come back, you have one next year. Let me ask you to pick it up, if this is fair, and ask you to make those different sounds.
Okay, great,
all right?
great.
If you can.
Yeah.
That might be unfair. Stay with us. We'll see if it works. So we'll see that when Nightwatch comes back.
Imagine, meet exciting, interesting people by just picking up your phone. Call now, dial 1-900-454-0500. Just $2 the first minute, $1 each additional. Adults only, please.
Call now and you can have 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal and this valuable 120-page guide to understanding money and markets. That's 13 weeks of the journal for the news and ideas you need every business day. And this guide free, which tells you everything you want to know about money and markets, now for only $34. Call toll-free 800-334-2900. Today's Wall Street Journal. Faster, tougher, smarter. Call 800-334-2900 now.
Want an adjustable bed, but don't think you can afford one? Then you haven't priced Craftmatic adjustable beds lately. Craftmatic Model 2 beds cost hundreds less than these quality flatbeds. And this Craftmatic Model 3 is available at 50% of Craftmatic 2's low cost. 50%. Craftmatic Model 3 and 2 beds adjust to all these healthful positions and offer optional heat and massage, yet cost less than these quality flatbeds. Get our free catalog by mail, including information on Craftmatic 3s at savings of 50% of Craftmatic 2's low cost.
Hello, I'd like to receive your free catalog and 50% information by mail.
Certainly, sir.
It's easy. So call for this free catalog right away.
Call 1-800-BED-9115. That's 1-800-BED-9115. Toll free. Call 1-800-BED-9115.
Welcome back. We are talking music and instruments, the clarinet specifically, with Eddie Daniels, who is here. And you were talking earlier before the break, Eddie, about the notion that the instrument can be almost different instruments. It can make different sounds. It can have a different feel. Show us.
Well,
if
I
you
mean,
can. It's hard. But
it's funny. The first thing that comes to mind is George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And that clarinetist in that orchestra actually goofed during the performance and created the whole opening of the Rhapsody in Blue in the way it was played today. And it was supposed to, I don't know what it was in the music, but it ended up. So that's kind of one kind of clarinet that we used to. And when we were hearing Benny, we're here, you know.
that clean,
Yeah.
clear, but very supple sound. that
And
it
also
had.
very linear up and down the chords. Not as, I mean, yeah, more up and vertical, not linear, vertical.
And sort of non-stop in the sense that you had the feeling that he would never run out of ideas.
That's right.
There was always more. Eventually he had to stop, but any given piece, but that there was more.
Right, right.
So two completely different things, and yet there was also the original Dixieland sound.
Yeah.
Pete Fountain has a sound.
right.
He has a, something you know Pete Fountain when you
Yeah,
hear it.
right.
It's got a, and what, I don't know what causes that.
Well, he plays a different kind of a mouthpiece, a different kind of a reed. His energy, his personality, his life, everything he was in his life.
It creates a really different sound, a deeper, more tubular
more like-
sound.
You know, kind of more New Orleans, more growly in the middle register and intense.
So from all of this, how does Eddie Daniels then find his voice?
Well, Eddie Daniels thinks of, how do I feel right now? Rather than, I got to play this tune and I got to play all the notes right. I think, here I am in the studio. Where am I? So.
That's great. So Eddie Daniels feels pretty good, I would say,
Yeah,
from that at this moment. Why do people find the instrument so difficult? You make it look so easy. Why do they find it so difficult?
It's an unwielding kind of instrument, different from the saxophone, which when you put the air in, it shouts at you. You blow and it goes, "Ugh." You do that on the clarinet, it goes, "Ugh," it backs up. It's not as easy to be expressive on, but for that reason I love it, because it's more subtle. That means, for me, the subtlety of the expression is more important than how loud it is or how easily it goes. It's like you get into if you got into a Corvette, you know, and you stepped on the gas and it went zoom. A saxophone does that more. This is a little bit more subtle, a little more fine-tuned, and you might not go as fast, but you'd go in style.
Right.
You know?
And now it requires, I think, a little more work, a little more precision.
That's right.
To get the clean sound. The saxophone is more forgiving, it seems
That's
to me, in
right.
some ways. You do hear the breathing sounds. Once somebody asked Sonny Rollins, what are those breathing sounds? He said, breath. That was a pretty good answer.
It's interesting, in the last week, two sound engineers, and I always have a problem with sound people who are doing the sound for concerts. Well, a friend of mine went to him and said, the clarinet doesn't sound right on the microphone. And he says, supposed to sound like a soprano sax, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Hey.
You know, which is like, that's why I have this crusade, to bring back this instrument, to let people know there is more subtlety in music. It's not just the high energy, screaming, intentional, intense emotionality that we're hearing in most of the jazz of today, but there's something like warmer and more touching that relates more to us inside on a softer level, and we need that in a lot of areas on this planet now. You know?
It's fascinating to me that you mix the jazz and the classical. Maybe we make too much of a distinction between the two things. I don't know. Maybe it shouldn't be, but you do mix it very successfully. Who else? Andre Previn does.
Benny did it.
Benny did it a little, particularly later in life.
He never did it on the same concert. He would do a classical concert and separately do a jazz concert. I'm trying to do both on one concert. And for me, it's a balance. I'm a Libra. I like having, if I can... It does a certain thing to me to play Mozart, and it touches a part of my personality, and then I can, you know, so there's a balance between the super refined, controlled, but emotional feeling with refinedness and control, and then just total emotion on an instrument with a little less control.
Well, it's wonderful. I mean, it so expands the instrument, and to listen to it is such a pleasure. Is there a problem, since the instrument hasn't been played all that much, in what's the word, coordinating it with more modern sound, more modern instruments, electric music, you know, is that a difficulty or not?
I think it's just conceptually, it's a difficulty for certain people, like for Thad Jones, to think of the clarinet in a contemporary jazz orchestra. The last album I did before Nepenthe was called Blackwood, and I used all synthesizers on it. And I loved the sound of it. It was very warm. It blended and melded very well with synthesized sounds as a juxtaposition.
And here in Nepenthe, you've got Chuck Loeb.
Chuck Loeb on guitar.
On guitar, which blends, in fact, very well.
Beautiful.
It's not a problem.
No problem.
It's not a problem. All right, we're going to hear a little music from you. Great. In the next segment. We got to take a break. We'll hear a little music from you. What are you going to play first?
We're going to play Sundance, written by Chuck Loeb, and then followed by Sueños, or Dreams, a tune written by myself.
Okay. We look forward to it. Stay with us. Don't miss this. Nightwatch will be back.
Now you can try America's most popular $10 Love Line with the first minute free. Meet someone special free on the Love Line. Dial 1-900-246-FREE. It's the Sweetheart Line where lovers meet. Try it free. Dial 1-900-246-FREE. America's Love Line. You've seen it in newspapers, magazines, on TV. Now catch the excitement. Try it free. Dial 1-900-246-FREE. That's 1-900-246-3733. Now you can try America's most popular $10 Love Line with the first minute free. Adults only, please.
How far do you have to go for a fixed-rate second mortgage loan? Not far. It's as close as Money Store's local toll-free number. 1-800-LOAN-YES. You're just a phone call away from low fixed rates and quick approval. And after closing, you've got 2 weeks to change your mind for any reason.
Guaranteed?
That's right. Just return the money and the deal is off. At no cost to you. Call from anywhere for details about our money-back guarantee. Dial 1-800-LOAN-YES.
Every day, all over America, thousands of abused and neglected children fall through the cracks of our court and foster care systems. They are often misplaced or forgotten, robbed of their chance for the future. You can help by becoming a court-appointed special advocate, a child's voice in court. Be a CASA volunteer. Speak up for a child.
He thinks he could do that to me, and I won't tell anyone? Well, I am telling.
Here's startling secret confessions. Call 1-900-370-9200.
I'm too embarrassed to tell my best friend, but I've got to tell someone.
Listen in privacy to women sharing their innermost feelings. Call 1-900-370-9200.
I can't believe you're telling me this.
Secret confessions. Call 1-900-370-9200. $2 for the first minute, $1 for each additional minute, for adults only.
If you're not recycling, you're throwing it all away.
Now we'll hear clarinetist Eddie Daniels, accompanied by guitarist Chuck Loeb. We'll hear a selection from his latest recording entitled Nepente. The song, Sueños. When we come back, more from Eddie and Chuck. Nightwatch continues. Back in a moment.
Should your name be on this envelope? It should be. If you or someone you love is age 50 to 80, and it will be addressed to you if you call now for the important information in this envelope. Free information that tells you how easy it is to get valuable life insurance protection with a whole life policy that is designed especially for men and women age 50 to 80. If you meet that age requirement, you are guaranteed this protection, because there's no physical examination and no medical questions. You cannot be turned down, regardless of your health. Your premium will be $6.95 a month and will never increase. And as you grow older, your benefits will never decrease. Some other policies designed for mature people actually reduce your benefits as you grow older. You may continue to pay their same premium, but they give you less and less coverage. So don't be fooled. Be careful. Go ahead and compare Colonial Penn with other companies. So get ready to make that important telephone call right now. If you call now, Colonial Penn Life Insurance Company will send you the important information in this envelope, and it's free. So if you are age 50 to 80, shouldn't you join the millions of people who have already called for this offer? Shouldn't you call now? Here's the number.
Call 1-800-328-2222 for free information in the mail about the life insurance Ed McMahon spoke about. The information is free and the call is free. So call now. 1-800-328-2222. 1-800-328-2222. That's 1-800-328-2222.
We're back with clarinetist Eddie Daniels and guitarist Chuck Loeb. They'll perform Sundance and a Dave Brubeck classic, In Your Own Sweet Way. Sweet music from Eddie Daniels and Chuck Loeb. Stay with us. Nightwatch will be back in a moment.
See this name? This name is one half of what you need to know if you are injured in an accident. Dialing INJURED is the other half.
If you or a member of your family has been injured in any accident, dial INJURED. Dialing Injured will provide you a free consultation with Shapiro and Yankowitz, a law firm of experienced trial attorneys dedicated to helping accident victims and their families.
I'm proud to live in this great free country, and I'm proud of our commitment to free speech, and I'm proud of our country's commitment to protecting the rights of its citizens to work and live free from bigotry and violence. That's why I was amazed to discover that many people die each year in anti-gay attacks, and thousands more are left scarred emotionally and physically. Bigotry has no place in this great nation, and violence has no place in this world, but it happens. Prejudice hurts, kills. Please don't be a part of it.
Yeah, we're having a problem with the car. It sounds like...
It don't sound like that. It's...
At Meineke, we can't always tell what's wrong with a car by the sound of the customer. But we can tell a lot from our free undercar inspection. We check your exhaust system, shocks, brakes, and more at no charge. We'll show you what's wrong and what's right. Then you'll know the price before any work begins.
You have a muffler for this.
So bring your car to Meineke. We'll give you a lift without taking you for a ride.
Petland Discounts, at Petland we care.
I'm Neil Padron, president of Petland Discounts, the tri-state area's largest chain of pet shops.
Owning tropical fish is fun and easy with Wardley Aquarium products. Tropical fish are beautiful, entertaining, relaxing, and educational, and may be the one pet everyone can own. Ask for Wardley products at
Petland Discounts, at Petland we care.
now over 50 convenient locations, all open 7 days.
For 35 years, Mordecai Richler has spoken his convictions in his writing. His subject has been the striving immigrant population of the streets of Montreal. Those streets have inspired many of Richler's most notable characters. His first came in his 1959 novel, The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. The book established him as one of the most important and most satirical voices in Canadian literature. The hustler Duddy Kravitz was portrayed by Richard Dreyfuss in the 1974 movie, which was also written by Richler.
Duddy, you're going to have to go home by yourself. I got to take Gisette someplace.
Why can't Dabrowski take Josette?
Because it's got to be me. Now, will you do as I ask, please?
Oh, jeez. He gets it off the top. Hey! You're pimping for her.
A much younger Richard Dreyfuss. It's been a decade since Mordecai Richler published his last novel, Joshua, Then and Now. His new book has been an obsession for many years. It's an ambitious, extravagant work called Solomon Gursky Was Here. Mordecai Richler is here. Welcome. Pleasure to have you here. This is a wonderful book. It starts in the first 7 pages. You create an outrageous character, and at least to this reader, get the reader hooked. I mean, it is a marvelous opening to what I expect when I get a chance to read it through will be a great deal of fun, but it's a big book. It's got a lot of characters, a lot of ideas, a lot of themes in it, and I wonder, when I hold it in my hand, where it all begins in you. Can you even recall?
Dimly.
Yeah.
It's a novel that gave me a good deal of trouble. I made several false starts, and I'd get to, let's say, page 134 and then hit a brick wall and start all over again and hit the same wall. And then about 4 years ago, we moved out to our country place, which is only about an hour and 20 minutes from Montreal on a lake just by the Vermont border. And I was determined to stay out there until I finished, or the novel finished me. However, had I known what I'd been getting into, I think I might have gone fishing instead. So it's a novel that covers about 150 years, and so it was a very difficult project. And what I guess was especially difficult is there are sections, chapters set in 19th century London and in the Arctic in the 19th century, and those are not voices I've heard or tunes I know. So it involved a good deal of research.
How'd you go about that?
Well, I read very deeply about 19th century England and about the Arctic. But I'm very suspicious of writers who do research for their novels, so I went about it very grudgingly. But it was something I had to do in this case.
Suspicious in what sense?
Well, I think you should, as a rule, deal with what you know and voices that are familiar. But I painted myself into this corner, and there was no other way out.
Sure, if you were going to start there and take it into what you know, you had to do that. The family that is depicted here is based loosely, I guess, on the Bronfman family. Do you accept that
well,
parallel?
To an extent. The trigger certainly was the meteoric career of Sam Bronfman, and there are passing resemblances between the character called Mr. Bernard and Sam Bronfman, but it's not a roman à clef, and that's about as far as it goes.
No, I don't mean that.
Yes.
A source of inspiration. We should explain that Bronfman was the founder of the family and empire that is built largely, I think, on Seagram's distilleries, and they have become a huge force and kind of a fascination for Canadians, have they
Yes,
not?
it's an enormously wealthy family, and it was founded on the rock of very clever bootlegging and
well,
during the
like some of
Prohibition
our
years.
great traditions.
Like some of your great traditions, yeah.
If the Bronfmans were the genesis, in some general way,
Yes.
of the Gurskys, where does the narrator, Morris Berger, come from?
Moses Berger.
I'm sorry,
yes,
Moses
no,
Berger.
That's all right. Out of my head, I guess. I mean, it's not autobiographical in any sense, so the novel is, I hope, full of inventions.
It is full of inventions. I can sense that already, just beginning it, and because of the comic and almost fantasy notion of this wonderful character coming out of the Arctic, looking for his raven,
Yes,
and descending down, which has been shot in the first scene, and taking it from there, and absolutely bowling over the quote Southerners that he comes upon, because he's come from the Arctic Circle.
Yes, that's right. And as far as they're concerned, we live in the South, yes. And
yeah, right. Now, you grew up in what is often described as the Jewish ghetto of Montreal.
That's right.
St. Urbain Street. Well, what was that like?
Well, you know, it wasn't any different, really, from being brought up in Brownsville or Brooklyn or Boston or Chicago. Of course, there are certain nuances. I mean, Montreal is a French city, and we are Canadian. But the Jewish community in Montreal in those days always looked to New York, and the more sophisticated people took the New York Times, but the New York Daily News and the New York Daily Mirror were both being read in all the local delicatessens. And so there was the cultural capital, as far as the Jewish community was concerned, was New York.
Okay, it's time for us to take a short break. We'll come back and talk some more about this. So stay with us. Nightwatch will be right back.
By L. Ron Hubbard. Buy your copy at B. Dalton's, Walden Books, or wherever paperbacks are sold. A fresh look at today's problems.
Looking for someone special? The Love Line is the answer. Looking for new people? The Love Line is the answer. Looking for romance, love? The Love Line is the answer. Connect with interesting, exciting people. Make new friends or talk to someone special. Call 1-900-909-2424. The Love Line is the answer. Call 1-900-909-2424. $2 the first minute, 45 cents each additional. Adults only, please.
Want an adjustable bed, but don't think you can afford one? Then you haven't priced Craftmatic adjustable beds lately. Craftmatic Model 2 beds cost hundreds less than these quality flatbeds. And this Craftmatic Model 3 is available at 50% of Craftmatic 2's low cost. 50%. Craftmatic Model 3 and 2 beds adjust to all these healthful positions and offer optional heat and massage, yet cost less than these quality flatbeds. Get our free catalog by mail, including information on Craftmatic 3s at savings of 50% of Craftmatic 2's low cost.
Hello, I'd like to receive your free catalog and 50% information by mail.
Certainly, sir.
It's easy, so call for this free catalog right away.
Call 1-800-BED-9115. That's 1-800-BED-9115. Toll free. Call 1-800-BED-9115.
Welcome back. We're in the midst of a discussion with Mordecai Richler, whose new book, Solomon Gursky Was Here, is out, has gotten wonderful reviews. If there are some pans in there, I haven't found them.
Oh, I find them.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Those are the ones you remember.
I love the way critics write. They have certain phrases without which they would be in deep trouble. I noticed in one, a manic tour de force. We always have tour de force.
Right.
Yours is a manic tour de force. Sorry about that.
Right.
Another one, a big, risky marriage of extravagant comic myth and compelling realism. Any of these make any, ring your bell? I mean, make any sense to you?
Oh, well, like most novelists, I like my work described in the most flattering terms, so...
Of course. Well, how about this one? It's a big, muscular, ambitious book, as populous as a novel by Dickens or Hugo, plotted within an inch of its author's life, crammed with large themes and small digressions.
So I read that one 3 times, yes.
You like that? It's on the wall, is it? But that's what it is great reviews, and they are great reviews, and in the introduction we mentioned that it was your first full-scale, large-scale novel in 10 years. There's always something sort of accusatory about that, and I'm not sure there should be. As though you've been sitting on your hands for 10 years.
That's right, yes. Well, during that period I did a film based on my last novel, and I wrote a number of pieces for Atlantic and Harper's, and wrote a children's book, and I'm getting older and slower.
You have also been a voice in the many debates that go on in Canada these days.
Yes.
Between the English and French-speaking populations, and I gather have managed to infuriate both sides in the process. How'd you do that?
Well, I must be doing something right. At the moment, it's becoming a bit abrasive, this quarrel, linguistic quarrel between English and French, which is rather sad. There are a lot of doomsday scenarios about Quebec seceding and Canada fracturing. I think we're just going to go on squabbling in a very tiresome way for years and years. I don't see Quebec really seceding. But it's a bit bizarre. The French in Quebec feel they're being rejected by the rest of Canada. On the other hand, for the last 30 years, the Prime Minister of our country, except for a few months, has come from Quebec. And you can't really elect a federal government without winning all the seats, or most of the seats in Quebec. So it's a very complicated issue, but at the core is the language issue. The French are fearful of immigrants coming into the province, and that they will then, and that the immigrants will naturally identify with the English-speaking community, because that is the language of success in North America, and that the French will then become a minority in their own homeland. And there's something in that, so there are problems.
There periodically you read the notion that parts of English-speaking parts of Canada would want to align and even join the United States. Is that?
I don't.
Is there even such an opinion abroad in Canada?
No, but a lot of the extremists or rednecks on both sides are being heard from now, and the voices of reason are really quite still. But when it comes to a vote, I don't think anything like that will happen. However, should Quebec secede, if that ever did come about, the rest of Canada would be at risk.
At risk for knowing where to go.
Well, it could become a kind of North American Balkans, because Ontario could be self-sufficient. British Columbia, you get beyond those mountains, is almost a different country. What we suffer from what is really important is there's very little sense of country. Most loyalties are regional. So it's a very fragile tapestry.
There are, of course, great regional loyalties in this country, too.
Yes.
The South, New England, the
That's
West,
right,
wherever. And yet it doesn't, I mean, it in fact contributes in some way to a union.
But there's a stronger sense of nationhood here than we have, which could be a good thing or a bad thing.
All right. Thank you very much, Mordecai Richler, for coming by and telling us a little about yourself, about Canada, and about this wonderful new book. I suspect it'll be richly rewarding for those people who pick it up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay with us. Nightwatch will be back in a moment.